Thank you very much, Ingrid, and thank you very much, everyone, too. I think it's a very broad topic that we have to discuss, the session being developing our own resources and research/innovation is the key. And when I saw it first, I felt a bit like Philip O'Doherty, who told us he didn't know where he was going to start with a topic like that. And I think I pretty much was in the same ballpark myself. Because as I look at it, I suggest, I had a man on the radio recently. His name was Robert Blythe, and he was an economist. He was working in the United States, and he had written a book. He's from Scotland, from Glasgow, Aberdeen, I think it is. And his book was A History of Austerity, the History of a Dangerous Idea. And he had a wonderful term of phrase. He had the kind of language that you just don't learn in college. You learn it on the streets. And he left lots of pictorial descriptions through the words that he used. And he used one that stuck with me, and it was, in terms of looking for solutions, that really we're looking for the key under the lamppost, because that's where the light is. And when I looked at this topic, I felt a bit like that. That somehow we've decided there's something new. That the new key for the future for us has got to be developing our natural resources as research/innovation, that this somehow was new. And ultimately, I think if I'm to say anything, it is that I think it is a bit like looking for the key under the lamppost. I don't think there's anything different. I don't think there's any secret about what the key is. Whether it is developing our resources or whether it is research and innovation, for me the key is what it always has been. It is about competitiveness. And it is something that we are working on, I think, quite successfully in this country at the moment, whether it is through the work of the National Competitiveness Council or whether it is through the work that the government is doing behind the scenes with their endless lists of things, like 300 points in their jobs path or their latest strategy for this year with 270 points that they have to achieve and so on. Small little bits. Iterations which ultimately add up to making the environment a little bit better for everyone. Because I know that David made one point about bringing the multinational or bringing the exploration wells into the Irish water. What was it that made it work? And he said maybe it was the favourable terms, the fiscal terms and so on. There's always something that makes it attractive to do business, whether it is to drill a well and develop the resources, or whether it is to locate your engineering industry firm in Donegal and export to the rest of the world. It is competitiveness. It is like, why is Philip here in Ireland operating his business that he's exporting to elsewhere? It's because some conditions here make it possible for him to do it. And it doesn't matter whether it's engineering to me or whether it is our natural resources, it is about competitiveness. And I think, if anything, when I looked at the topic, that's what I felt. I felt like maybe we're trying to find something new for the 21st century. There is nothing new. Ireland is in business, any business. Whatever it is that's going to create the wealth and create the jobs, that's what we're at. And for a period of time, that can be hard manufacturing, where the multinationals were coming in and building factories here, which were putting in place circuit boards and stuff like that, things which were relatively low value added and moved off. And now, at the moment, it seems to be a lot of the pharmaceutical industries and some of the Googles and so on. It doesn't really matter to us. I don't think it's ever going to matter to us in terms of bringing in these guys, as long as they're bringing something positive. In the meantime, the conditions which are important to attract those companies and the conditions which are important to encourage even the likes of drilling in the Irish Sea are something else entirely. They are the key. Now, innovation and research are part of that. But you can have lots of research which doesn't make you more competitive. You can spend a load of money researching something and not get any result, which is why, as Philip said, the banks don't actually like giving the money to start-up companies for research and development. So it's something else is the key to me. And I don't think that we should think that we're getting it wrong. I actually think we're getting it right. And I was struck recently by, and it kind of touched a nerve with me when I saw the topic, because it suggests that, are we doing it wrong? It's something that our industrial strategy is at the moment. Is it wrong? And I don't believe it necessarily is. I was recently down at the annual statement of the IDA. Richard Bruton was the man who was there taking the plaudits, and the IDA were delighted to tell him that they'd have a very good year in 2013. It was only earlier, it was about 2 weeks ago, it was in July, and it was a very optimistic note about the economy. And their ball game is inward investment. It's not developing our natural resources. You know, they like to see all of the stuff about research and innovation here being done by the multinational companies. Not Irish necessarily, but it would be wonderful if it was. But either way, they were saying things, despite the environment that we're all in, we're looking pretty optimistic, cautiously optimistic. And I was struck by the fact that they said, last year they had a very good year. They had 13,000 new jobs from foreign companies coming in here. And because they had a relatively low level of job losses, it turned out it was a record number of net jobs created. I think it was something like 5,700 from memory. It was something like that. It was very big. But 13,000 jobs created. What they said was they had 61 projects last year, and what they told us 2 weeks ago is despite all the doom, despite all of the gloom, they have 70 projects in 6 months so far in 2013. And they figure that they're going to create 7,000 jobs out of those 70 projects. That's a half a year's work. That is a very significant improvement, even on last year. I think it's a 15% increase in the number of projects and successful projects that they've got. And it's about a 10% if you double it, if they were to carry that going forward for the second half of the year. In terms of jobs compared to last year, it's a 10% increase. So I'm trying to say now, do we need a new key? And I'm not 100% sure. I'm not saying the IDA is everything. But I think that the work that we're doing, we shouldn't undervalue the improvements and the attractiveness of the Irish economy. Yes, there are certain things which are holding us back, and we have an awful lot of work to do still to fix the problems that are there on the fiscal and banking side. But this is still an attractive place to be. This is still a good place to do business, as Philip Doherty there has just described. And so, if anything, to me, the key is to stick to our knitting. There's no secret. I don't believe there is. There's no new golden fleece out there. There's no new way of doing it. It is hard work. It is all about competitiveness. Now, if you use the competitiveness to develop your natural resources, well and good. If you use your competitiveness to attract in whatever it is required to get innovations in the Irish economy, well and good. But I don't believe that there is anything that's the key for our economy and for our future and for our prosperity other than being competitive. And that's a very, very challenging thing from time to time. The IDA has had a very, very good outcome, I think. And I think that in that outcome, we should take some pride. Because in that outcome, given the fact that they have always been very good at their job, there is a reflection that not everything in this country is as bad as people would like us to believe. It carried a warning, which I think their statement carried a warning, which I thought was very surprising. And it was that they have a problem with the availability of accommodation. They said that there are 3 new projects earmarked for later this year, which are going to take up 600,000 square feet of prime space, appropriate space, modern office space in the Dublin region. And they said their problem is that when that 600 square feet is taken up, there is very little extra capacity in that area in Dublin, in the Dublin region. There are very, very little spare accommodation. They have a lot of people coming next year. They want to keep marketing Ireland, but they have nothing to show them. They can't come and say, see this building, you can have that. So their call was, we've got to get something done very fast. That, to me, was very surprising, because I hadn't heard somebody say stuff like that before. You know, yeah, we have a problem in relation to an overhang of residential property, but there are things happening, and the Irish economy is still alive underneath all of that, and we are still attractive. Now, it is a really big challenge for policymakers in government and for NAMA to deal with that, because none of us want to see the potential jobs that could come in 2014, whoever was lucky enough to get them, going, because we can't attract in companies who are quite interested in coming in here. And as they come in, they contribute so much to the Irish economy. You know, we are very successful at attracting these multinational companies because we're very good at facilitating them making money. In 2005, for instance, There were 1,023 IDA client companies, and they accounted for 90 billion euro of expenditure, of sales. That would be international sales. And out of that money, they also spend nearly 15 billion euro in the Irish economy. We had 155,000 jobs, and the average payroll was about 38,600 euro. That was in 2005, well before any of this happened, where we are at the moment, the economic crash. Today, we find that there is pretty much similar level of IDA companies there, 20 more. But the sales have gone from 90 billion to 126 billion, which has been a huge increase of 40%. Their spend in the economy went up by 28%. It's 19 billion euro that they're spending in the Irish economy, and the average payroll went up by 24%. So they have done really well. We've got 28% extra spend. They've got 40% extra sales. They are making big profits in Ireland. They bring an awful lot of technology. They transfer an awful lot of innovation into the Irish economy. It's a great solution. It isn't the whole solution, but it happens because we remain attractive. There are elements of the Irish economy which are still competitive. Now, we always have to work at that, but that is good news. But when you look at that and you say, well, that's very good. So I said to myself, well, maybe the problem is that maybe we have a lot of eggs in that basket. The IDA is successful. It is a jewel in the crown. Those multinational companies are good. We want to develop our own resources. I don't believe for a second we're going to be able to do that unless we're able to also attract in these guys, because the conditions which enable us to attract them in are the same conditions that enable us to be competitive in developing our own resources and our people, as David Horgan said. I think that's a huge issue too. But when I began to look at it, I said, yes, but we do have a problem, because the IDA's attractiveness and the attractiveness of the country, one very, very big element of it is our taxation regime for companies. And we have seen what has happened on that front in the last couple of weeks. Actually, I was very surprised myself to learn that companies like Apple and Google and others are located absolutely nowhere for corporate tax purposes, that they have no tax residency anywhere. I find that really remarkable. I wondered whether it could have conceivably been true, but we all now know that it's true. And to the extent that Ireland is very good at facilitating these companies making money and doing business, we're also extremely good at facilitating them in finding their ways around international tax laws to ensure that they manage to keep the vast majority of the money that they make from their sales. This notion of the double Irish, which isn't a breakfast or anything remotely like that, which has come into public usage in the last couple of weeks, I think is quite shocking. It isn't that the IDA or anybody related to that or our industrial policy is built on it, but this is how these international companies are able to maximise the benefit of locating in Ireland, where you set up two companies, two subsidiaries, both of which are Irish, but one of which is resident in Bermuda or in the Cayman Islands or somewhere like that. And so the sales which are channeled through the one which is located here are billed as a bill for services or otherwise to the one in the Caymans or Bermuda or elsewhere. And that is stunning, because it's extremely difficult to explain that to people who pay high taxes. We're all very happy to have those companies here, very happy to have €9 billion of spending in the Irish economy, very happy to have the jobs. But if you turn a blind eye to stuff like that for too long, you end up in 30, 40 years with some kind of global environment which isn't very pretty. You know, maybe we'll all be there come Davos with our anti-globalisation flags if we get enough of this. If they get that much money and pay no taxes, what kind of a society, a global society, are we going to have? So that is being tackled. And it has been tackled. And in very recent weeks, the G8 and the G20 both came along and they both said that there is now going to be a new study done over the next 12 to 30 months, that there's an action plan, and that they're going to find out what the economic model is of these companies, and they're going to have a new allocation in relation to where they have to pay tax. That is a huge risk for the Irish industrial strategy, because we are attractive for many reasons, but one of them is taxation. And the IDA says don't worry, because we still have our low corporate tax rates, and if you take away all of this loophole stuff that they engage in everywhere else around the world, we'll still be attractive. I hope they're right, But it does show that we are vulnerable on that front. And it brings us back then, maybe, to some of the issues in relation to our own resources, developing our own resources. But it doesn't change the fact that what we have to do is become competitive in all ways. When you look at the competitiveness issues and the things which matter there, you're looking at things like the cost of waste, the cost of energy, the cost of labour, transportations, telecommunications, public administration, professional services. We have heard about these things year in and year out since I started in RTE back in 1992. We've heard more about them since we were in this new agreement, this Troika arrangement over the last 2.5 years. But every single thing that I have read in any of those national plans or those Troika arrangements in terms of commitments that we were supposed to do, I have read before. I saw them all from OECD reports on an annual basis. These were always the prescription to make Ireland competitive. So the work is actually finally being done in some of the cases because we're being forced to do it by the people who have been bankrolling the economy in recent years, and that is a good thing. Now, one of the things is when we come out of this period of rescue, whether it is the end of this year and hopefully it will be, we still have to carry on some of those agendas. We still have to bring down the prices of professional services and so on. Ireland, in the World Economic Forum National Competitiveness list last year, there must be one due pretty soon again, but we were 27th out of 144 countries. Up 2 places, thank God, from where we were for the previous 2 years where we were 29th. But we were 4th in the early 2000s. We were one of the most competitive countries in the world, and we're talking about growth competitiveness, and we let it slip. So when you talk about the new key, innovation and research and natural resources, I think you're talking about the wrong thing. I think you have to realise, I know David said the past is no good, we want to move on and get to the future, but if we don't realise the mistakes that we made in the past, and we don't understand the things that we didn't do, that we should have done, we will never get to a prosperous future. So I am looking a bit to the mistakes we made in the past, because we're living with trying to mop some of them up at the moment.
George, you're kind of running into time.
Running into time. But I think in terms of all of those things, the Irish economy has very significant advantages. I think that the competitiveness issues which are important to the multinational companies were pretty much okay on some of them. Like if you consider what the Global Economic Index would show, it would show that for a country like Ireland, which is an innovation-driven economy, and there are very many developed economies in the same category, that in most of the measures that they use, we are very similar to everybody else in our class. And by that I mean in things like business sophistication, in things like technology readiness, in things like labour market efficiency, and in higher education and training. We are pretty much where we should be in our class. We're down in relation to macroeconomic environment and financial environment and the size of our market. But I will not buy the idea that there's some new key. Those things are being fixed. We're bang on where we should be. We should be better. We need to correct things like the education system, make sure that it is delivering for purposes. But we need to, I think, take some pride in the fact that we are getting quite a few things right. And the more we get those right, the more companies like Petrol Resources will develop our natural resources. But not because we tell them to, because it's worth their while. You know, companies like EI Engineering will remain in Ireland competing and developing and providing jobs, not because we say they're now the key. You can't make them. It's because it's worth their while. We're in business, and I say it again, any business. And if you're in any business, make it worth their while. So I don't believe that there's a new key. I think it is always, and always was, and always will be, fundamentally about competitiveness in all of its aspects. And on that front, we've got some success. We're doing a lot of hard work, but we shouldn't be down on ourselves. We're not that bad at all. Thank you.